My name is Sarah, and at 34 I thought I had the perfect marriage. Mark and I had built what seemed like a beautiful life together in Seattle with two wonderful children and stable careers. But then came that moment, that single question that shattered everything I believed about our 12 years together. "Isn't $5,000 a month enough?" he asked, and in that instant I finally understood what he'd been doing to me all along. Before I share what changed my life forever, please let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if stories like mine help you see the truth in your own life. I still remember the morning everything started to unravel, though at the time I didn't recognize it as the beginning of the end. I was rushing around our three-bedroom house in Bellevue getting Emma and Noah ready for school, while Mark sat at the kitchen table reviewing what he called our monthly budget on his laptop. This was our routine had been for years. I earned $5,000 a month after taxes working as a registered nurse at Harborview Medical Center, and Mark brought home $4,500 from his accounting job at a mid-sized firm downtown. Together we should have been comfortable, more than comfortable really, with nearly $10,000 coming in each month. Mark was everything a wife could want, or so I kept telling myself. He picked up the kids from school when my shifts ran late, cooked elaborate dinners every Sunday, and never forgot our anniversary or my birthday. He handled all our finances because, as he often reminded me, he had the accounting background. "You save lives, honey," he'd say with that charming smile that had won me over in college. "Let me handle the numbers." And I did. Every month, I transferred my entire paycheck into our joint account, trusting him completely to manage our future. The house felt warm that morning, filled with the smell of coffee and Noah's favorite cinnamon toast. Emma was practicing her multiplication tables at the counter, while Noah drew pictures of dinosaurs in his notebook. Mark looked up from his screen, his brown eyes focused and serious. "Sarah, we need to talk about cutting back more. The kids don't really need those after-school activities. Soccer and art classes are luxuries we can't afford right now." I paused, holding Emma's lunchbox in my hand. "But Mark, Emma loves soccer, and Noah's art teacher says he has real talent. It's only $300 a month for both." "Every dollar counts," he said, closing his laptop with that final gesture I'd come to recognize. Discussion over. "We need to think about their college funds, our retirement. Do you want to work night shifts forever?" The guilt hit me immediately. He was right, wasn't he? He always seemed to be right about money. I noticed things, though, small things that didn't quite add up. Like how Mark always had the latest iPhone while I'd been using the same one for 4 years. Or how his work clothes were always from Nordstrom while I shopped sales at Target. But he explained these away too. "I need to look professional for client meetings. Your scrubs are provided by the hospital. It's different." He had an answer for everything, always delivered with such logic and patience that I felt foolish for questioning him. When the washing machine broke 3 months ago, he said we couldn't afford to fix it yet, so I'd been taking our laundry to the laundromat every Saturday. When I mentioned it to my coworker Jennifer, she looked at me strangely. "Sarah, a repair would cost maybe $200. You guys make good money. Why are you doing laundry at a laundromat?" I repeated Mark's words about saving for the future, but they sounded hollow even to my own ears. Jennifer had just shown me the diamond anniversary band her husband bought her for their 10th anniversary. "It wasn't crazy expensive," she said, "but Tom wanted me to have something special." I looked at my own plain wedding band, the same one from our courthouse wedding 12 years ago. Mark had promised we'd upgrade when we were more financially stable. That evening, Mark worked late again, his Tuesday client meeting running over as usual. He'd been having a lot of evening meetings lately, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always with clients who apparently couldn't meet during regular business hours. I tucked the kids into bed alone, reading Noah his favorite story about a brave little boy who defeats a dragon. "Mommy," Noah asked sleepily, "why doesn't Daddy ever read to us anymore?" "Daddy's working hard to take care of us," I said, smoothing his hair. But the words felt automatic, rehearsed. When Mark came home after 11, I was sitting in the dark living room, something I rarely did. "You're up late?" he said, seeming surprised. "Mark, I've been thinking. Maybe I could look at our budget too. I'd like to understand where our money goes." His reaction was immediate and sharp. Are you saying I'm not managing our money well after everything I do for this family? He pulled out his phone, showing me a complex spreadsheet filled with numbers and categories. Look at this. Mortgage 2400, utilities 400, groceries 800, car payments 600, insurance, health costs, kids' school supplies, clothes. It adds up, Sarah. Every penny is accounted for. The numbers swirled before my eyes, presented so quickly I couldn't process them. I'm not questioning you, I just want to understand. There's nothing to understand except that we need to be more frugal. Maybe you could pick up extra shifts instead of questioning how I manage our finances. His tone had shifted from defensive to cold. I thought we were a team. I thought you trusted me. And there it was, the guilt again. Of course I trust you. I'm sorry. You're right. He softened immediately, pulling me into a hug. I know it's stressful, baby, but I'm taking care of us. Have I ever let you down? I hugged him back, but over his shoulder I saw his phone light up with a notification. Goldstone Investments. Before I could read more, he pulled away and grabbed the phone. Spam, he said quickly. These investment companies never stop. But something about the way he said it, the speed with which he deleted the notification, planted a seed of doubt that would grow into something much larger. The doubt that had taken root that night grew slowly, fed by small inconsistencies that I couldn't ignore anymore. 3 weeks after I'd seen that Goldstone notification, my friend Lisa invited me to lunch at a waterfront restaurant. She'd just returned from a 2-week vacation in Hawaii with her husband, and her photos were gorgeous. Crystal clear water, sunset dinners on the beach, helicopter tours of the volcanoes. You and Mark should totally go, she said, scrolling through her pictures. The kids would love it. There are these amazing family resorts. I stirred my soup, avoiding her eyes. Maybe someday. We're focusing on saving right now. Lisa put her phone down and looked at me directly. Sarah, you've been saying that for 5 years. You guys both work full-time. You never go anywhere except that campground 2 hours away. Camping is fun for the kids, I said, the defense automatic now. Sure, but don't you want more? When was the last time Mark took you somewhere nice, just the two of you? I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. Our 10th anniversary had been dinner at Olive Garden because Mark had a coupon. Last Valentine's Day, he said we should skip the commercial holiday and save the money. My birthday was usually a cake at home with the kids. Lisa, can I ask you something weird? I said suddenly. How much do you guys spend on groceries for your family? She thought for a moment. Maybe $600 a month, $700 if we're hosting or something. Why? My stomach dropped. Mark claimed we spent $800, and Lisa had 3 kids to our 2. Just curious. Everything's so expensive now. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. Instead of depositing my tips from grateful patients into our joint account like usual, I kept $40 and hid it in an old purse in my closet. It felt like betrayal, but also like freedom. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I started paying attention to prices at the grocery store, keeping mental notes of what things actually cost. I noticed that Mark often came home with shopping bags from stores but never showed me receipts. I threw them away, he'd say if I asked. Why do you need them? Don't you trust me to buy groceries? Always that question. Don't you trust me? Emma inadvertently gave me the next clue. We were driving home from her soccer practice, the one Mark had reluctantly agreed to let her continue, when she mentioned something strange. Mom is Aunt Julia, Dad's sister. I nearly swerved the car. Dad doesn't have a sister, honey. He's an only child. Who's Julia? Emma looked confused. The lady we visit sometimes when you're at work. Dad said she's Aunt Julia. She has a really nice house with a pool. She made us cookies last week. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. When did you go there last week? Thursday, when Dad picked us up early from aftercare. He said you didn't need to know because it would be a surprise for later. Thursday, when Mark was supposedly in client meetings. That evening I watched Mark differently. He moved through our house with such confidence, kissing my cheek as he passed helping Noah with homework, loading the dishwasher. The perfect husband. But I noticed now how he kept his phone face down always. how he closed his laptop whenever I entered the room, how he'd created a whole system where I never had access to any financial information beyond what he chose to show me. "Mark," I said casually, while we were getting ready for bed, "someone at work mentioned Goldstone Investments. Aren't they that company that keeps spamming you?" His reaction was subtle but there. A tightening around his eyes, a pause in unbuttoning his shirt. "Yeah, persistent bunch. Why, just wondering if they're legitimate. My coworker was thinking about investing." "Tell them to stay away," he said quickly. "Probably a scam. You can't trust these financial companies." But I'd already looked up Goldstone Investments. They were a legitimate high-end investment firm that managed portfolios for wealthy clients. Minimum investment, $250,000. The universe seemed to conspire to reveal the truth after that. 2 days later, I ran into Tom Mitchell at the grocery store. Tom had worked with Mark at his accounting firm, and I hadn't seen him in years. "Sarah, how are you? How's Mark enjoying the consulting life?" I kept my expression neutral despite my confusion. "He loves it. You know Mark always working." Tom laughed. "I bet. When he left 3 years ago to start his own firm, we all thought he was crazy. But clearly it worked out. I heard he landed some major clients." 3 years ago. Mark had been telling me about his projects at the accounting firm just last week. I managed to finish the conversation with Tom without revealing my shock, but my hands shook as I loaded groceries into my car. That night I called the accounting firm directly, pretending to be updating our insurance information. "I just need to confirm my husband Mark Stevens still works there for our records." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mark Stevens hasn't been employed here since January 2021. I hung up and sat in my car in the hospital parking garage, trying to process what I'd learned. For 3 years, my husband had been lying about where he worked. Every morning when he put on his suit and kissed me goodbye, every evening when he complained about his boss or told me about difficult clients, every single day had been a lie. But I needed more information before I confronted him. I'd learned that much from watching him operate. You needed facts, evidence, documentation. So I started gathering it all. I created a secret email account and started forwarding myself photos of anything suspicious. I took pictures of his car's odometer to track where he really went during the day. I even followed him once when I called in sick to work, watching as he drove not to his old office, but to a gleaming building downtown where Goldstone Investments had their Seattle headquarters. My husband, who told me we couldn't afford to fix our washing machine, walked into that building like he owned it. I saw him through the glass lobby shaking hands with people in expensive suits, laughing and confident in a way I'd never seen him at home. That night he came home and told me about his boring day at the accounting firm, about the annoying client who couldn't understand basic tax law, about his supervisor being unreasonable. I nodded and smiled and served dinner like always, but inside I was planning. "Mark," I said carefully, "I've been thinking about getting a promotion at work. It would mean more money for us." "That's great, honey," he said, but I caught the flicker of something else in his expression. "How much more?" "Maybe another 1,000 a month." "Well, make sure you update the direct deposit to our joint account when it happens. Every bit helps." Every bit helps. This from a man who was walking into investment firms that required $250,000 minimums. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood there gripping the sink, staring at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger, someone who'd been sleepwalking through her own life. When I came back to the table, Noah was telling Mark about his art project, a painting of our family he'd made at school. "I made you really tall, Daddy, because you're the strongest. And Mommy is smiling because she takes care of everyone." "That's beautiful, buddy," Mark said, ruffling his hair. "But remember, Daddy takes care of everyone too. That's why I work so hard." I watched this performance, this careful construction of himself as the provider, the protector, the one who sacrificed. But what was he really doing all day while I worked 12-hour shifts, while I shopped sales for our kids' clothes, while I spent Saturdays at the laundromat, because we supposedly couldn't afford a $200 repair? The next phase of my investigation required help, and it came from an unexpected source. My younger brother Kevin worked in IT security, and we'd always been close despite living in different states. When he visited for Noah's birthday, I pulled him aside while Mark was entertaining the kids with party games in the backyard. "Kevin, I need your help, but you can't tell anyone, especially not Mark." His expression immediately turned serious. "What's wrong? Is he hurting you?" "Not physically, but I think he's hiding money. A lot of money. He's been lying about his job for 3 years." Kevin's jaw dropped as I explained everything I'd discovered. Without hesitation, he agreed to help. "Sarah, this is financial abuse. You know that, right?" I hadn't wanted to put that label on it, but hearing someone else say it made it real. While Mark was outside, Kevin quickly installed hidden software on our shared home computer that would capture screenshots and browsing history. "I'm not proud of this," he said, "but you need to know what you're dealing with." It took 2 weeks before the software paid off. Mark had gotten sloppy checking his real email on the home computer late one night when he thought I was asleep. The screenshots Kevin helped me retrieve were devastating. Mark wasn't just a consultant. He was a founding partner at MJS Financial Advisors, a firm that managed over $50 million in assets. His income wasn't $4,500 a month. According to an email from his accountant, he was pulling in at least $25,000 monthly with quarterly bonuses that could double that. There were property records, too. A penthouse condo in downtown Seattle purchased 2 years ago for $1.8 million. A vacation home in Aspen. Investment accounts with balances that made my head spin. All in his name alone, or in the name of various LLCs he controlled. But the email that broke me was the one to his lawyer. "Need to accelerate the timeline. S is getting suspicious. How quickly can we move forward with what we discussed? I want to make sure she can't access anything when the time comes. S. Sarah. Me." I printed everything, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage to get the papers into a folder. Then I found more. So much more. There was a storage unit across town registered in his name. Credit cards. I'd never seen with massive limits and balances that showed purchases at high-end stores, restaurants where a single meal cost more than our supposed monthly grocery budget. And then there was Julia. Julia Morrison wasn't his mistress as I'd feared when Emma first mentioned her. She was worse. She was his sister, despite him telling me for 12 years that he was an only child. Together they'd inherited money from their father, a man Mark told me had died broke when he was in college. Another lie. Their father had been a successful real estate developer who'd left them $8 million to split. The emails between Mark and Julia were clinical in their cruelty. "Keep playing the family card," Julia wrote. "She won't suspect anything if the kids are involved. Remember, you're building generational wealth. She would just waste it." "The trust is almost set up," Mark replied. "Once the divorce is filed, she'll get the minimum. I've been documenting her financial illiteracy for years." Financial illiteracy. I was a registered nurse with a bachelor's degree. I managed medication dosages that could kill if miscalculated, monitored complex medical equipment made life or death decisions every shift. But according to my husband, I couldn't be trusted with money. The Saturday I discovered all of this. Mark took the kids to Julia's house again, telling me he was taking them to the park. I used that time to do something I should have done years ago. I opened my own bank account at a different bank across town. The banker, a kind woman named Patricia, saw something in my face. "First account on your own?" she asked gently. "Yes," I whispered, embarrassed at 34 to be opening my first individual account. "You'd be surprised how common this is," Patricia said. "Are you safe?" The question caught me off guard. Was I safe physically? Yes. But emotionally, financially, psychologically, I'd been under attack for years without even knowing there was a war. That night, Mark came home in a great mood. He'd bought the kids new iPads, claiming he'd gotten a bonus at work. "A small one," he clarified quickly when he saw my face. "But I wanted to treat them. They've been so good about understanding why we can't do more." I watched my children's faces light up with joy over their new devices, watched Mark play the generous father, and felt something inside me harden into determination. He was using our children as props in his performance, teaching them that their mother's hard work wasn't enough, that we were struggling when he had millions hidden away. That's wonderful, I said, my voice steady. The kids deserve nice things. Mark seemed pleased by my response. I knew you'd understand. Oh, and I'll need to work late again Tuesday. Big client presentation. Of course, I smiled. I'll handle bedtime. But Tuesday I wouldn't be handling bedtime. Tuesday I was meeting with Alexandra Chen, one of Seattle's best divorce attorneys, recommended by Patricia at the bank, who it turned out had been through something similar. I'd already sent Alexandra all the evidence I'd gathered. The trick now was to keep playing the role of the trusting wife while I prepared for war. Every morning I kissed Mark goodbye and went to work. Every evening I came home and acted grateful for whatever scraps of financial information he chose to share. I stopped asking questions about money, which seemed to please him. You seem happier lately, he commented one night over dinner. I've just decided to trust you completely, I said, meeting his eyes. You've always taken care of us. He actually smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. That's all I've ever wanted, baby. To take care of my family. His family. The family he was planning to financially abandon as soon as the paperwork was right. I squeezed his hand back and thought about the recording app on my phone that was capturing every word. Emma interrupted the moment. Dad, can we go to Julia's pool again this weekend? Mark shot her a warning look. We'll see, sweetheart. Who's Julia? I asked innocently. Someone from work. Just a client, Mark said smoothly. She lets the kids swim sometimes when we have meetings. No big deal. I nodded, filed it away with all his other lies, and started counting down the days until Tuesday. Tuesday arrived, gray and drizzly fitting weather for what was about to unfold. I told Mark I was picking up an extra shift, but instead I drove to Alexandra Chen's office in a glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay. My hands trembled as I rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, clutching the folder containing evidence of my husband's betrayal. Alexandra was nothing like I'd expected. Petite and soft-spoken, she looked more like a kindergarten teacher than someone who'd won millions for her clients. But when she started reviewing my documents, her expression turned sharp and focused. This is extensive, she said, examining the screenshots of Mark's real income. You've done excellent work gathering evidence. Most people don't have nearly this much proof. I had help, I admitted. My brother works in IT. Smart. Now let me be clear about what we're looking at here. This isn't just hiding assets. This is systematic financial abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Your husband has been planning this for years. She pulled up Washington state law on her computer. Because you've been married 12 years and have 2 children, you're entitled to substantial support. But more importantly, the court takes a very dim view of hidden assets. He could be looking at criminal charges. I don't want him in jail, I said quickly. He's still my children's father. Alexandra nodded. Understood, but we'll use that possibility as leverage. Now his plan seems to be filing first to control the narrative. We need to beat him to it. She explained the strategy. File immediately, freeze all known accounts, demand full financial disclosure, and request exclusive use of the family home. Based on these emails to his lawyer, he's planning to file next Monday. We file Thursday. This Thursday, in 2 days. Can you maintain the act until then? I thought about my children, about the years of being told we couldn't afford basics while Mark accumulated millions. Yes, I can do it. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. Mark came home Wednesday night talking about weekend plans, suggesting we take the kids camping again. Good for them to appreciate simple pleasures, he said while wearing a watch I now knew cost $15,000. That sounds perfect. I agreed, chopping vegetables for dinner. Should I pack Friday night? Yeah, we'll leave Saturday morning. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I love you, Sarah. I know things have been tight, but I promise it won't always be this way. The knife stilled in my hand. Even now, even when I knew everything, he was still lying. I know, I whispered. Thursday morning was surreal. Mark left for work at 8, kissing me goodbye like any other day. The moment his car turned the corner, I called in sick to work and drove to the courthouse with Alexandra. By 10 a.m., the petition was filed. By noon, the temporary restraining order freezing all identified accounts was signed by Judge Martinez. He'll be served at his actual office this afternoon, Alexandra informed me. Are you ready for this? I've been ready for 3 years without knowing it, I replied. At 2:47 p.m., my phone exploded. 23 missed calls from Mark in 5 minutes. Then the text started. What have you done? Sarah, this is a mistake. Call me right now. You don't understand what you're doing. Please think of the children. I didn't respond. Alexandra had coached me on this. Let him panic. Let him wonder how much I knew. By the time I picked up the kids from school, Mark had called 53 times. Emma and Noah chatted about their day, oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated in their father's carefully constructed world. Mark was home when we arrived, his car parked crooked in the driveway. The kids ran inside, excited to see him home early. I followed slowly, my phone recording in my pocket. He stood in the kitchen, still in his expensive suit papers scattered on the counter. The legal documents. His face was pale, angry, desperate all at once. Kids, go play in your rooms, he said, his voice controlled. Mommy and I need to talk. Once they were upstairs, he turned on me. You went through my things. You violated my privacy. Your privacy. I kept my voice calm. We're married, Mark. Or did you forget that while setting up your secret millions? His face changed, then the mask finally dropping completely. You have no idea what you've just done. I was protecting our assets, building something for our children's future. By lying to me for 3 years, by making me feel guilty for buying our daughter soccer cleats, by letting me wash our clothes at a laundromat while you owned a penthouse downtown. I earned that money, my investments, my intelligence, my work. While I was sleeping, because according to your emails, you've been working about 3 hours a day for the past 2 years. He stepped closer, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt physically intimidated. You think you're so smart now. You think some lawyer is going to get you half. I've been documenting your financial incompetence for years. Every time you didn't understand a bill, every time you asked stupid questions about our budget, every purchase you made without thinking. Like buying our son a birthday present. Exactly. Emotional spending. No thought for the future. I pulled out my phone, showing him it was recording. Keep talking, Mark. Tell me more about how incompetent I am. The judge will love to hear it. His face went from pale to red. You're recording me in my own house. Our house. Though apparently you have several others I didn't know about. That's when he said it. The words that revealed everything about how he saw me, our marriage, our life together. Isn't $5,000 a month enough for you? That's more than most people make. You should be grateful. Grateful for being allowed to keep the money I earn. For being taken care of. Do you know how many women would kill to have a husband who manages everything? A husband who steals everything you mean. It's not stealing if I earned it. And my salary. Who earned that? He laughed harsh and bitter. You think being a nurse compares to what I do? Moving millions, making real money. You put band-aids on people, Sarah. I build wealth. Wealth you hid from your family while we lived like we were paycheck to paycheck. Because you would have wasted it. Look at your friend Lisa spending money on vacations, designer bags. That would have been you. That should have been my choice to make. No, he said firmly. It shouldn't have. You proved you couldn't handle money the moment you agreed to let me manage it all. A smart person would have insisted on transparency. The victim blaming was breathtaking. So this is my fault for trusting my husband. It's your fault for being naive. I looked at this man I'd loved, who'd fathered my children, who'd slept beside me for 12 years while plotting to leave me with nothing, and felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Mark, do you even love me? Did you ever... For just a moment, his mask cracked. I loved who I thought you could be. But you never grew into that person. You stayed the same sweet, trusting girl I met in college. No ambition beyond your little nursing job. My little nursing job that saved 3 lives last month. Anyone can be trained to do what you do. Not everyone can do what I do. I recorded every word, every admission, every insult. Alexandra would later tell me it was the most damning evidence she'd ever heard a spouse voluntarily provide. What about Emma and Noah? I asked. Do they also not deserve to know their father is a millionaire? They're better off learning the value of money this way. When they're older, when I have full custody, I'll teach them about real wealth. Full custody. You're never here. You don't know their teachers' names, their friends, their favorite foods? I know Julia's been documenting what a good father I am. All those times you were at work and I was caring for them. You mean when you were at Julia's house lying to them about who she was? His eyes widened. How did you— The children, Mark. The children you claim to protect told me about Aunt Julia. They don't even know they have an aunt because you told me you were an only child. For the first time, he looked genuinely shaken. Julia has nothing to do with this. Really? Because I have emails between you two planning this for years. She's been helping you hide assets, hasn't she? You don't have those emails. I pulled out the printed copies from my bag, watching his face crumble as he recognized his own words. The trust is almost set up. Once the divorce is filed, she'll get the minimum. Where did you get these? Does it matter? The judge will see them. Along with the property records, the investment accounts, the cars, the storage unit full of things you bought while telling me we couldn't afford to fix our washing machine. He sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking older. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Honesty, partnership, respect. But since you're incapable of those things, I'll settle for what's fair. Half of everything, full custody with reasonable visitation for you and enough support to ensure our children live the life they should have been living all along. I'll fight you. With what? The lawyer you've been secretly paying who's now conflicted out because you consulted about divorcing me. The hidden assets that make you look like a criminal. The recorded admissions of financial abuse. Or maybe with Julia as your character witness, the sister you've been lying about for 12 years. He was quiet for a long moment. I never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just never meant to get caught. The next 3 weeks were a hurricane of legal procedures and emotional upheaval. Mark moved into his secret penthouse after trying unsuccessfully to make me leave our family home. The judge had been clear I stayed with the children. He could visit them there supervised until a proper custody arrangement was established. The first time he came for his supervised visit, he brought expensive gifts again. A new gaming system for Noah, designer clothes for Emma. The court-appointed supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Dorothy, took notes on everything. Daddy, why can't you live with us anymore? Noah asked, clutching the unopened game. Ask your mother, Mark said bitterly. Actually, I interjected calmly, Daddy made some choices about money that weren't fair to our family. We're working with a judge to make things better. Is it because of the secret pool house? Emma asked innocently. Mark's face went red. Even now, in front of the supervisor, he couldn't help but lie. There's no secret pool house, sweetheart. But Aunt Julia's house has a pool, and you said it was a secret from Mommy, Dorothy wrote furiously in her notebook. The financial disclosure process was even more revealing than my investigation had uncovered. When forced by the court to reveal all assets, Mark's net worth was just over $7 million, not including the inheritance from his father that was tied up in trust funds, not including the offshore accounts in the Caymans that the forensic accountant Alexandra hired had discovered. How, I asked Alexandra during one of our meetings, how did he accumulate so much while we were married? He was taking your salary and investing it under his name, every month for 12 years, plus using the joint account for basic expenses while his income went entirely to building his portfolio. Essentially, you've been funding your own imprisonment. The criminal charges Alexandra had mentioned became real when the IRS got involved. Mark had been claiming me and the children as dependents while filing separately in ways that weren't exactly legal. He'd also been running personal expenses through his business in violation of tax law. I can make this go away, he told me during one exchange at the house, Dorothy conspicuously absent for a bathroom break. Drop the divorce, and I'll make sure you're comfortable. Define comfortable. I'll give you an allowance. 8,000 a month. You can stop working, stay home with the kids. An allowance. From my own money. From our money. Mark, there is no our anymore. You made sure of that when you decided I wasn't worthy of knowing about our actual financial situation. His phone buzzed. Julia. He declined the call, but not before I saw the name. How's Julia handling this? I asked. She's fine. Really? Because I heard she's being investigated too. Something about helping you hide assets. Her law license might be in jeopardy. Mark's facade cracked. You vindictive. Careful, I warned, pointing to my phone. Still recording. The truth about Julia came out the following week. She wasn't just helping Mark hide money from me. She was stealing from him too. The investment accounts she managed for him were missing about $500,000 siphoned off over 2 years into her own accounts. Mark called me panic in his voice. Did you know about Julia? That she was stealing from you, I suspected when I saw some inconsistencies in the records. Guess you're not the only one who can hide money. But she's my sister. And I was your wife. Trust is hard, isn't it? The irony was lost on him. He genuinely couldn't understand how Julia could betray him, even as he sat in the ruins of his 12-year betrayal of me. The custody evaluation was perhaps the most painful part. The evaluator interviewed everyone: teachers, coaches, the pediatrician, our neighbors. The picture that emerged was clear. I was the primary parent in every way that mattered. Mark didn't know Emma was allergic to strawberries. He couldn't name Noah's best friend. He'd never been to a parent-teacher conference. But I provided for them, he insisted during his interview, which I later read in the report. Financially, perhaps, the evaluator had responded. But parenting is more than money. Emma broke my heart one night as I tucked her in. Mom, are we poor now that Dad's not here? No, sweetheart. We were never poor. Daddy just wanted us to think we were. Wyatt. How do you explain gaslighting to a 10-year-old? Sometimes adults make mistakes about what's important. Daddy thought money was more important than truth. Is that why he lied about Aunt Julia? Yes. What other lies did he tell? Too many to count, I thought. The important thing is we're going to be honest with each other from now on, okay? She nodded, then asked quietly, Is Daddy a bad person? No, honey. Daddy made bad choices. There's a difference. But privately, I wasn't so sure there was. The settlement negotiations were brutal. Mark fought everything trying to claim the penthouse was bought before our marriage. It wasn't that his business had no value. It did that I didn't deserve alimony because I was capable of working irrelevant given the length of our marriage and his deception. Then Alexandra played our ace. The recordings. Every admission, every insult, every threat. Mark's lawyer, a shark named Richard Brennan, listened to his client explain how he'd been hiding assets for years, how he considered me too stupid to handle money, how he'd planned to leave me with nothing. My client is willing to go to trial, Alexandra said calmly. We're confident the judge will find the systematic financial abuse and fraud compelling. Of course, the media might too. Millionaire hid fortune while wife used laundromat makes a good headline. Richard whispered urgently to Mark. I could see the struggle on Mark's face. His reputation, his business, his entire carefully crafted image would crumble if this went public. What do you want? Richard finally asked. Alexandra slid over our demands. The house, 60% of all assets, $20,000 a month in combined alimony and child support, full physical custody with Mark getting every other weekend and one dinner per week. This is extortion, Mark spat. This is consequences, I replied. It took 3 more weeks of negotiation, but eventually Mark cracked. The final settlement was slightly less than our initial demand, but still more than fair. The house remained mine and the children's. Mark had to liquidate the penthouse and several investment accounts. The final number was $15,000 a month in support, with Mark responsible for all educational and medical expenses for the children. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood outside the courthouse in unexpected sunshine. 6 months had passed since that morning Mark had asked if 5,000 a month wasn't enough. 6 months of discovering the depth of deception I'd lived with for 12 years. Alexandra stood beside me. "How do you feel?" "Free," I said and meant it. "What's next?" "I'm going back to school, getting my master's in nursing administration. I've already applied." "With your settlement, you don't need to work." "But I want to. I love my job. I just want to love it on my own terms now." Mark emerged from the courthouse with Richard saw us and quickly walked the other direction. But not before I caught his expression. Defeated. Smaller somehow. "Any regrets?" Alexandra asked. "Just one. I wish I'd trusted myself sooner." 2 years have passed since that day at the courthouse, and life looks nothing like I could have imagined when I was washing clothes at the laundromat, believing we couldn't afford a $200 repair. I did go back to school, completing my master's in nursing administration in 18 months while working part-time. The flexibility my settlement afforded meant I could be there for every soccer game, every art show, every moment that mattered. Last month I was promoted to Director of Nursing Education at the hospital, a position that pays $8,000 a month. But more importantly, it's a position I earned through my own merit, my own hard work, my own intelligence that Mark said didn't exist. The kids have thrived in ways that still amazement me. Emma, now 12, is the star of her soccer team and recently started coding classes. She wants to build apps that help people. Noah, 9, has his art displayed in a local gallery's youth showcase. His painting of our family still shows Mark, but smaller now, standing apart from the rest of us. Children see truth even when we try to hide it from them. Mark sees them every other weekend and Wednesday dinners, though he often cancels at the last minute, citing work emergencies. The children have adapted to his inconsistency with a resilience that both breaks and amazes me. They've learned, perhaps too young, that love isn't just words or gifts, but presence and truth. "Mom," Emma asked me recently, "do you think Dad loves us?" In his own way, yes. But sometimes people don't know how to love properly. Like how he didn't know how to share. Exactly like that. The financial freedom has been liberating in ways I didn't expect. Not just the ability to buy things, though. Fixing that washing machine immediately felt like a victory, but the mental space that comes from not constantly worrying about money. I sleep better. I laugh more. I've taken the kids to Hawaii, to New York, to Europe, all the places Mark said we couldn't afford while he was buying properties I didn't know existed. But the most unexpected development has been my friendship with Julia. Yes, Mark's sister, the woman who helped him deceive me for years. It started with a letter she sent 6 months after the divorce. "Sarah, I owe you an apology that words can't adequately express. I convinced myself I was protecting family wealth, but I was really enabling my brother's cruelty. Losing my law license was the wake-up call I needed. I've been in therapy confronting why I participated in something so fundamentally wrong. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand. But if you're willing, I'd like to try to make amends, not for my sake, but for Emma and Noah, who deserve to know their aunt without lies." It took me 3 months to respond and another 3 before I agreed to meet her. Coffee turned into monthly lunches, which became genuine friendship. She's been honest about her own issues with Mark, how he manipulated her to convincing her I was a gold digger who would waste family money. "He's a master at making you believe his version of reality," she told me once, "even when evidence suggests otherwise." Julia now helps me understand investing, teaching me what Mark never would. My settlement money isn't just sitting in savings. It's growing through smart, diversified investments that I understand and control. The woman Mark painted as financially incompetent now has a portfolio that would impress any advisor. I've also started dating again, something I thought I'd never do. Robert is a surgeon at my hospital, divorced himself with 2 teenage daughters. He's everything Mark wasn't: transparent, humble, genuinely interested in partnership rather than control. When the bill comes at dinner, we discuss who's paying and why. He's seen my investment portfolio because I showed it to him, proud of what I've learned. He celebrates my promotions, my achievements, my independence. "I love that you don't need me," he said recently. It means you're with me because you want to be. The children like Robert but aren't ready for anything serious, and neither am I. We're taking it slow, building trust carefully, with the full knowledge that trust once broken is never quite the same again. Mark, from what I hear through the legal channels we still maintain for custody arrangements, isn't doing as well. His business suffered when word got out about the divorce details. Hiding assets from your spouse, it turns out, makes clients nervous about what you might hide from them. He's still wealthy by most standards, but not nearly what he was. The $7 million has become perhaps $2 million after the settlement taxes and some bad investments Julia claims he made in cryptocurrency trying to rebuild quickly. He's dating someone new, a 25-year-old named Brittany, who, according to Emma, asks Daddy to buy her things all the time. I hope for her sake he's learned something about honesty. But when Emma tells me Brittany doesn't know about the penthouse Mark lost or the IRS investigation, I suspect he hasn't. The storage unit Mark had hidden from me became mine in the settlement. Going through it was like archaeology of a secret life. Designer clothes with tags still on exercise equipment worth thousands, art pieces, electronics, all purchased while he told me we needed to be frugal. I sold most of it, donating the proceeds to a financial literacy program for women leaving abusive relationships. It felt like the right kind of justice. My mother, who'd always thought Mark was wonderful, struggled to accept the truth at first. But he seemed so responsible, she kept saying. He took care of everything. That was the problem, Mom. He took care of everything, including keeping me in the dark. She understands now, especially after seeing how the children and I have flourished without Mark's constant control and manufactured scarcity. She recently apologized for all the times she'd told me how lucky I was to have a husband who handled the finances. I was raised to think that was a blessing, she said. I didn't realize it could be a weapon. The hardest part of these 2 years hasn't been the legal battles or the financial adjustment or even single parenting. It's been reconstructing my sense of self after 12 years of gaslighting. There are still moments when I question my judgment when I hear Mark's voice in my head telling me I'm not smart enough to understand something. But those voices get quieter each day. Therapy has helped enormously. My therapist, Dr. Williams, specializes in financial abuse survivors. Yes, that's a specialty that exists because this happens more often than people realize. She's helped me understand that Mark's treatment wasn't about money at all, but about power and control. Financial abuse is often the hidden abuse, she explained. There are no visible bruises, no obvious scars, but the damage to self-worth and autonomy can be just as severe. Learning to trust my own financial decisions has been a journey. The first major purchase I made, alone a new car to replace the 12-year-old Honda Mark insisted was still perfectly good, left me anxious for weeks. Was I being frivolous? Wasteful. Then I realized I was buying a safe, reliable vehicle for my children with my own money that I earned and invested. The only person who needed to approve was me. The kids have noticed the change in me. You smile more now, Mom, Noah told me recently while we were painting together in the art studio I created in what used to be Mark's home office. Do I? Yeah. And you don't say we can't afford it anymore. What do I say instead? You say, let's see if that makes sense for us. I like that better. I like it better too. Choice rather than deprivation. Decisions rather than decrees. Last week I ran into Tom Mitchell again, Mark's former colleague, who'd inadvertently helped me discover the truth. He was with his wife at the farmer's market, and we chatted while browsing organic vegetables that I can now buy without guilt. I heard about everything, he said quietly while his wife examined tomatoes. I'm sorry. I should have reached out when Mark left our firm. The way he talked about money even then, there were red flags. You couldn't have known, I assured him. Maybe not, but I could have said something when he was bragging about his investments while you two were supposedly struggling. It didn't add up. People often say this to me now, how they noticed things that didn't add up, but didn't want to interfere. I understand their hesitation, but I also wish someone had asked me directly, Sarah, are you okay? Do you have access to your family's finances? Do you know where your money goes? So now I ask these questions of others. Gently, carefully, but I ask. And you'd be surprised how many women's faces change when I do. How many admit they don't really know their financial situation, that their husbands handle everything. I've become something of an unofficial advocate, sharing my story, when appropriate, connecting women with resources, recommending Alexandra to several friends who discovered their own versions of financial deception. One friend found out her husband had been sending money to a secret family in another state. Another discovered her name had been removed from their investment accounts years ago without her knowledge. How did we not see it? They ask me the same question I asked myself 1,000 times. Because we trusted, I tell them. And trust isn't a weakness even when someone exploits it. The $5,000 question, the one that revealed everything, has become almost a dark joke between Alexandra and me. We had lunch last month to celebrate another successful case she'd handled, another woman freed from financial abuse. Did you ever think a simple question about money would change your entire life? She asked. Isn't $5,000 a month enough? I repeated, shaking my head. He really thought that would shut me up, that I'd accept my little allowance from my own salary and be grateful. The arrogance is always their downfall, Alexandra observed. They get so comfortable with the deception, they forget their victims might wake up. I'm awake now. Fully, completely, irrevocably awake. I see the world with clear eyes, understand my worth in concrete numbers and abstract value. I teach my children, especially Emma, about financial literacy, about the importance of always having your own money, your own accounts, your own knowledge. Never let anyone, no matter how much you love them, be the only one who understands your finances, I tell her. Love and money aren't the same thing, but they're both important, and you deserve transparency in both. The bittersweet truth is that Mark gave me gifts through his betrayal that he never intended. He taught me I was stronger than I knew. He forced me to become financially literate in ways I might never have pursued. He showed me that my nursing career, which he dismissed as putting band-aids on people, was actually a calling that gave me purpose and independence. And by trying to make me small, he ultimately set me free to become larger than I ever imagined possible. Sometimes Emma and Noah ask about the camping trips we used to take, the ones Mark insisted on, because hotels were too expensive. I tell them we can still go camping if they want, but now it's a choice, not a limitation. Last month we did both a weekend camping in the mountains, followed by a week at a resort in California. The contrast wasn't lost on them. This is better, Noah said, floating in the resort pool. Which part? I asked. Having choices. Exactly, my sweet boy. Having choices. I still see Mark during exchanges, of course. He's smaller somehow, diminished not by the loss of money, but by the loss of control. He still tries occasionally to manipulate situations, suggesting the children don't need certain things, that I'm spoiling them, that money isn't everything. You're right, I told him during one such exchange. Money isn't everything. Honesty is, respect is, partnership is. But you wouldn't know about those things, would you? He doesn't argue anymore. What's the point? We both know the truth now, all of it laid bare by legal documents and recorded conversations, and the simple, devastating reality that he never saw me as an equal. The irony is that if Mark had been honest from the beginning, if we'd been true partners, we might have built something even greater together. 2 incomes invested wisely over 12 years with compound interest and shared goals. We could have had 10 million by now, legally, ethically together. But that would have required seeing me as a whole person rather than a subordinate to be managed and controlled. Instead, he has his diminished fortune and his new girlfriend who doesn't know the truth, his every other weekend fatherhood, his reputation as the man who hid millions from his family. And I have my freedom, my children, my career, my hard-won knowledge, and a future I'm building with my own hands, transparent and honest and entirely mine. When someone asks me now about my divorce, I don't hide the financial abuse aspect anymore. My ex-husband hid millions while telling me we couldn't afford to fix our washing machine. I say simply, the reactions are always the same: shock, then recognition, as if they know someone in a similar situation or suddenly understand their own. Last month I gave a presentation at the hospital. about recognizing signs of financial abuse in patients. The room was packed mostly with women, many crying by the end. Afterwards, the emails poured in stories of control and deception, and the slow realization that something wasn't right. "Your story gave me courage," one wrote. "I'm getting my own bank account today. I finally asked to see our tax returns," another shared. "My husband got angry. That told me everything." This is the unexpected legacy of Mark's betrayal, becoming a voice for others trapped in similar situations. "I never wanted to be an advocate, never wanted my private pain to become public knowledge. But if my story helps one woman recognize that being told, 'Isn't $5,000 enough?' when there are millions hidden away, isn't just wrong but abusive, then something good has come from those 12 years of deception." Robert asked me recently if I ever regret not seeing the truth sooner. It's a fair question, one I've asked myself countless times. But the truth is, I saw it exactly when I was ready to see it. Any sooner, and I might not have been strong enough to fight. Any later, and Mark might have succeeded in his plan to leave me with nothing. "The timing was perfect," I told Robert. "Painful, but perfect. How can you be so philosophical about it? Because anger is exhausting, and I have a life to live. And what a life it is." Last week, Emma's soccer team won their championship game. I was there cheering from the sidelines, not worried about the cost of the celebration dinner afterward. Noah's latest painting, a landscape of Mount Rainier, sold for $500 at a local art fair. He wanted to give me the money, sweet boy. But I told him it was his to save or spend as he chose. "But you need it for our family," he said, echoing years of Mark's programming. "No, honey. We have what we need. This is yours. You earned it." The look of wonder on his face at having his own money at 9 years old told me everything about how far we've come. Yesterday I received an unexpected call from Julia. Mark had contacted her, desperate, needing a loan. His latest investments had failed, and Brittany had left him when the money got tight. He'd suggested Julia and I had conspired against him, that we'd planned his downfall together. "I told him the truth," Julia said, "that his downfall was entirely self-created, that you and I became friends after not before and only because you're remarkably forgiving." "What did he say?" "He hung up. But Sarah, I want you to know something. Our father would have been appalled by what Mark did. Dad believed in partnership and transparency. Mark learned the wrong lessons from his success." It's comforting somehow to know that Mark's betrayal wasn't inherited but chosen. That somewhere in his history was a model for better behavior he simply rejected. As I write this sitting in my home office that overlooks the garden I can now afford to maintain, I think about the question that started everything. Isn't $5,000 a month enough? At the time, it felt like a slap, a dismissal of my worth and work. Now I see it differently. It was a revelation the moment the mask slipped and showed me who Mark really was. $5,000 a month is more than enough when it's yours, when you control it, when you understand it. It's not enough when it's treated as an allowance from your own earnings, when someone else decides what you deserve from your own labor, when it's used as a tool of control rather than a means of partnership. The truth is, no amount would have been enough under Mark's system, because the amount was never the point. The point was power control, the ability to make me feel small and dependent while he accumulated wealth he never intended to share. But here's what Mark never understood. You can't make someone small forever. Eventually they grow, they learn, they fight back. And when they do, when they finally ask the right questions and demand real answers, the entire house of cards collapses. So to anyone reading this who recognizes their own story and mine, who's been told their salary isn't enough while suspecting there's more being hidden, who's been made to feel financially incompetent while working hard every day, know this. You deserve transparency. You deserve partnership. You deserve to know the full truth about your financial life. And if someone tells you, "Isn't what you have enough?" when you suspect they have more, trust that instinct. The question isn't whether what you have is enough. The question is whether you're being told the truth about what you actually have. And if you're not, if you're being deceived and controlled and gaslit about money, then no amount will ever be enough because it's not about the money. It's about respect, equality, and your fundamental right to make informed decisions about your own life. My marriage ended the day Mark asked if $5,000 a month wasn't enough. But my real life, began the day I decided to find out what he'd been hiding. And while I wouldn't wish financial abuse on anyone I'm grateful for, where that painful journey led to freedom, to strength, to the knowledge that I was always enough with or without the money, with or without Mark, with or without anyone's permission to know my own worth. The children and I are planning a vacation to Greece this summer, something that would have been impossible in our supposed poverty. Emma's been researching historical sites, while Noah's excited about the art museums. They've both been learning about budgeting, saving, and yes, spending wisely on experiences that matter. "Mom," Emma asked while we were planning, "are we rich now?" "We're comfortable," I told her. "But more importantly, we're honest about what we have." "That's better than rich," she decided. "From the mouths of babes comes wisdom." "Yes, sweetheart, honesty is better than rich. Truth is better than wealth. And freedom, the kind that comes from financial independence and emotional liberation, is worth more than all the hidden millions in the world." Mark taught me many things through his deception, but the most important lesson was this: when someone shows you who they are, through their actions, believe them. When someone tells you that your hard-earned salary isn't enough while hiding their wealth, they're telling you everything you need to know about how they see you, value you, and ultimately how they'll treat you. I'm grateful now for that revealing question for the moment. Mark's mask slipped and showed me the truth. "Isn't $5,000 a month enough?" "No, Mark, it wasn't enough. Not because of the amount, but because of the lie it represented. What's enough is honesty, partnership, respect, and the freedom to make informed choices about our own lives. And now, finally, I have all of that and more. The money is nice. The security is wonderful, but the freedom is priceless. To everyone watching who's struggled with financial deception in their relationships, I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not crazy, and you deserve better. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Have you or someone you know experienced financial abuse? What were the warning signs you noticed? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it opened your eyes to this often hidden form of abuse. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Remember, your financial independence isn't just about money, it's about your fundamental right to equality and respect in all your relationships. Thank you for watching, and may you always have the courage to ask the difficult questions and demand the honest answers you deserve.